Thank you so much, Angela Ragsdale, and Rick Fortner, and David Smith. Amazing. I love the music. And I was thinking about, this is kind of the lost and found department today. I want to talk about what we lose, how we find it. I also want to, I've been thinking the word grace. My predecessor, Dr. John Wolfe, some of you knew him. He used to say that grace, the way he defined it, grace is the goodness of life that is available to all of us to the degree that we can open ourselves to experience it. The goodness of life available to all. I mean, look at this day outside, sunshine, the beauty. Can we open ourselves to really take it in? And that's what he said was life is full of that. And yet sometimes things get in our way and don't allow us to be able to take in the joy, the beauty, the love that is right in front of us. There are some phrases that we all know, and I'd like to say the first line and see if you can help finish it for me. How about, it's always darkest before? All right, you know that one. No pain, no gain. Okay. Every dark cloud has a see, you know these. When given lemons, make lemonade. That's it. So each of these sayings tells us that suffering and struggle can lead to something better. And the concept, it's so common, it's so hopeful that many of us want to get to the lemonade without ever having to taste the lemons. I remember seeing an ad in an in-flight magazine about a process called liposculpting. Have you heard of this? Anybody done liposculpting? No, you don't have to raise your hand. But so apparently they can extract fat from your belly and your buttocks and put it into your chest, your biceps, and your calves. What a deal. We'll be giving out coupons for that afterward. So today it seems like you can get thin without dieting and you can get muscles and get into shape without exercise. People want to gain, but they don't really want the pain. Or here's another famous phrase for you. We want to have our cake and... Right. Or we might say we want to have our cake and turn it into muscle. But despite all the technological advances that we have in this world, all the things that we've discovered and figured out how to do, no one has yet invented lipo-spirituality. Right? There's no quick fix to enlightenment, to a good life, to a wonderful life, as the coupon on the back of the program says. No shortcuts, if you will, to redemption. Now, generally, when we talk about redemption, there's lots of religious overtones to that word. There's the idea within Christianity that redemption is about the fact that we lost some purity and some goodness because of Eve in the Garden of Eden, and we need to be somehow saved from that original sin and be redeemed from that original sin. And then in Buddhism and Hinduism, often you have these ideas of being redeemed from the cycle of life and death and suffering into the world of oneness, which is where we supposedly were before we were born and where we're destined to go. So there's lots of ideas about redemption, but as I talked to the children about this morning, I like to think of it as a coupon that we redeem by using our life for its intended purpose. If we don't use it, we lose it. But we can cash in our life, our gifts, our talents, our just the energy that animates our life. Some way our presence sometimes is all we need to bring our presence into someone else's life. And then we redeem that life for its full value. And that's available to all of us. And it's a way that we can have a wonderful life and feel like when we get to the end of our lives that we've lived our lives in such a way that we've used it well. And I think a lot about Harry Belafonte, who died this week, and Rick started playing some Harry Belafonte at the beginning. He died, he was 96 years old. He was an incredible person who used his fame, used his fortune and notoriety to advocate for civil rights and human rights. He was a unique figure in the history of the black freedom struggle here in the United States. He was a powerful voice for justice because he leveraged his celebrity, something he had, and he used it for something more than himself. Do you know that in 1957, Harry Belafonte sold more records than Elvis Presley or Frank Sinatra? And he did so without touring in the South, because he refused to tour in the South from 1954 to 1961 because of the treatment that black entertainers had to go through to play and make music in the South. So it's pretty incredible. Not only did he outsell those guys, they were touring the whole country. He was just touring half the country, and he still captured the community and the hearts of this nation. Belafonte was one of Martin Luther King Jr.'s confidants, who Martin Luther King would talk to and ask questions about what to do, where to go next, to strategize. Belafonte provided the King family with money, because Dr. King only received $8,000 a year from his church, from his ministry. And that wasn't enough to go flying around the country. And Belafonte said, we need you. Our nation needs you to be the voice of this movement. So I'm going to provide money for your kids, for your family, to pay the mortgage and other things so that you can be out there in the world doing what we need you to be doing, using your gifts. I'm going to use my gifts to help you use your gifts so that we can all hopefully flourish in a nation where everybody has the potential and possibility to use their gifts for good. In 1963, Harry Belafonte bailed Martin Luther King out of the Birmingham jail. And he raised $50,000 more to bail everybody else who had been in the struggle that day out of the jail. He contributed in 1961 to the Freedom Riders, who got young people, black and white, who got on buses and traveled across the South where it was illegal, often to be together. And, male, female, black, white, all on these buses, these college students and others who, they got firebombed, they got attacked, but they were destined to try to make a difference. And Harry Belafonte gave them money to do that. He supported voter registration drives. He helped organize in 1963 the March on Washington. And during the Mississippi Summer in 1964, Belafonte bankrolled the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, which was led by John Lewis and others who went on to do great things. But that's the kind of person he was. In other words, Harry Belafonte cashed in his life, his gifts and talents for their full value for something larger than himself. By using it, we could say he redeemed his life for its full value. Well, what is it that causes a person to be generous? What is it that causes us to sacrifice for others, to rise above self-centeredness, to show up and be there for someone else when they need it, even when it may be inconvenient? So here at All Souls, we say that every person has value and worth, has something to contribute, and that's no one can take that away. And it's the role of our having a spiritual life, or having a community where we come together like this to help us to discover and to learn and to develop our ability to share our gifts. And we need this because life gets in the way a lot of times of us doing the right thing. We all fall short of our own expectations of ourselves. Sometimes even just the most basic expectations of being a good friend. We don't show up. We have great ideals and intentions, and then we don't follow through. We might get tempted or addicted or procrastinate, or we're dealing with the effects of trauma, or we just make a mistake that hurts another person unintentionally. There are a lot of reasons why we fall short in our own lives. But when we do, we need a recipe, if you will, to help us figure out, how do I redeem this situation? How do I get back into the community in a good way, or in relationship in a good way, or make what I did wrong better. And there's also a special sauce I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to get to that in a little later. But first, I want to share a story that I normally don't share stories that come from the Christian or the Jewish scriptures in this, in the point, because people have so many associations with them that they can't even hear them without, making all kinds of other associations. So I'm going to ask you to bear with me this morning, because I found the perfect story to make this point that comes from the Christian scriptures. It's a parable. It's a teaching story. And I realized that it's really a humanist story. If you know the Unitarian Church was founded back 450 years ago with the idea that Jesus was a person. He was a teacher. He was someone who was an example. He lived a good life. We could try to follow his life. But the very idea was that he wasn't God incarnate. So I figure if you have that understanding, then you can hear a story that includes Jesus without automatically assuming, oh, this is about God. No, this is about a man named Jesus. All right? So if you're here for the first time, I don't usually do this, but so it's a story of Zacchaeus. You may have heard of that story. We're told that Zach was short in stature. The word stature translated from the Greek word helikia, which can also be translated as character. So Zach was short in character. He was a Jew, but he was also the chief tax collector for the Romans. And he was known for entering people's homes and taxing them on their property and sending them money to support the Roman emperor and empire and the Roman army that was occupying and oppressing his people. And he would inflate the numbers of what he needed to get from them, and he would keep the extra for himself. And it says in the story that he was a very rich man. Now, to understand what being a tax collector back then would be like today, I want to ask you to imagine that the Russians are successful in taking over Ukraine, right? Brutally bombing, killing people into submission, taking over their land and taking control of their government. And a Ukrainian person becomes the tax collector for the Russian government. And he goes around home to home and says, I need you to give this money. And he not only gets what he needs to send to Putin to prop up Russia and the Russian army that is occupying his country, but also puts on a little extra for himself. All right, that person would not be very well liked by their neighbors. That's Zach. Now, word had spread that this itinerant Jew named Jesus was coming to town, and it was said that he could teach, he could heal, he could even tell a great story. And so, in other words, in the ancient Near East, he was like a rock star. And the people came out like it was a festival, crowding the street, like it was a parade. Everybody's out there with their lawn chairs and whatever, and they're like ready to see this person come in and hear this person talk. There wasn't a lot to do back then for people, so they, this is a big deal. And Zach wanted to see him, but he was short, so he climbed up this sycamore tree, it says, so that he could look from above and see this person coming. So Jesus arrives with his entourage, and Jesus sees Zacchaeus up in this tree, and he's like, Zacchaeus, come down from that tree. In fact, I'm coming over to your house for dinner tonight. And you can imagine what the people thought when they heard that. They're like, what, in all the people in the whole town? He's going to have dinner with him? And some of the people probably just assumed, it's just another money-grabbing preacher, cozying up to the big donor, trying to get some money, not caring about his ethics or where that money comes from. So Zach, who enters homes over and over again with greed and selfishness and power, which he uses to intimidate people and cheat them for his own good, experiences this itinerant Jew who people revere entering his home with love and acceptance. Now, Zacchaeus hadn't felt that in a long time. People didn't like Zacchaeus. Zacchaeus probably didn't like himself very much. And all of a sudden, this person comes and sees something more in him and gives him a sense of what it feels like to be loved and accepted. He said, I like that. I want more of that. And it breaks his heart, and he's transformed, and he decides to change his ways. He was lost, and then he was found. He found himself. He found something with him. You know, the name Zacchaeus means in Hebrew, pure or innocent. It comes from the Hebrew Zakai. So like you and me and all of us, he was born pure and innocent. We come into this world so pure. But through the course of growing up, he made decisions, and things happened to him, and he debased his own life, his own name, and the sacredness of his being and his potential. And you have your stories, and I have my stories of ways in which we've left a piece of our integrity behind because we didn't live up to our own expectations. We hurt somebody. Maybe hurt our reputation with others because of something we've done. Because nobody gets it right all the time. And we could have the greatest of intentions. And we could be good people. We could want to do good, and we could still hurt someone else or make a mistake or be tempted, get addicted, whatever, all the different things that get in our way of experiencing the goodness of life that is available to all of us to the degree that we have the ability to receive it. And so, as the story goes, it gives us a map, really, for how to, when we're lost, how to find ourselves. So let's see what the story can teach us, because ultimately that's what it is. It's a teaching story. It's not, you don't have to believe it. I don't know if it happened. I don't think it happened. I think it's just a story. So after experiencing this love and acceptance despite his awful deeds, have you ever had that where somebody just loves you? You're like crying, like, I can't believe I've done this. I feel awful. And somebody in your life still loves you. And you realize, wow, thank you. I needed that. I needed to know because I feel like a worm on the ground. But you still can see something in me. And it feels so good. So Zacchaeus comes out of his house after this experience, and he addresses the crowd that had gathered probably to protest. And he says, I'm sorry. I've been cheating you for years. And you know it, and so do I. I feel awful, and I'm ashamed of myself. I've gotten rich at your expense, and I apologize. And to make it right, I'm going to repay each of you from what I've stolen. In fact, I'm going to repay you back 4 times the amount I cheated you out of, he says. And today I'm giving half of all my goods to the poor of this town. It's the original Hollywood ending. But the reason that it's been told over and over and over and over again for thousands of years to lots of different people, and it's been given lots of different meanings by different people, but the reason is because it has the recipe for a good apology. It starts with saying the simple but demanding words, I'm sorry. But that alone isn't enough. A good apology also expresses how you feel about what you've done. I'm ashamed of myself. I'm embarrassed about what I did. I'm disappointed in myself. However you feel. But the most important thing is it has to be sincere. It's really how you feel. letting the person know. And then to complete the apology, to ask, what can I do to make it right? Is there anything I can do? And then do it. And that's the recipe. Many of us have never really been taught how to give a proper apology. But it's one of the things that helps us have a wonderful life. So there's 3 steps. Saying I'm sorry is the first. It's only the first. Some people stop there. They want the lemonade without the lemons. But expressing sincere remorse. I'm embarrassed about what I did. And then finally, to offer what can I do, and following through to try to make it right. But, every relationship can't get fixed. Every situation can't be repaired. But it begins with an appropriate apology. That's the only way it's going to start to be repaired, if it can be repaired. And many, many can. It's amazing. Relationships are like organisms that live and breathe and change in every moment. And when we come in and we bring some care and love and honesty and authenticity, sometimes it just changes the whole organism. You know when you don't see somebody for a year or years, and then you see them and it's like, bam, it's right back there, and you can give and take, and all of a sudden there's just all these feelings that return. Relationships are like organisms. So when we apologize or do that, we can shift things and change things. But I think you can tell that this is a topic that I know something about. I've made a lot of mistakes. I've hurt people in my life, never intentionally, never like with my mean spirit, but because of my laziness or because of my short-sightedness or greediness or whatever it was that I did or didn't do that I shouldn't have done, and I hurt somebody. And so I've learned how to say I'm sorry because I have had to. And what I've learned is that there are two layers, if you will, to the process of redemption. One is the external. It involves, this apology to the other person or trying to repair the situation. And in that case, we don't have control over how that person is going to respond. So they may come toward us. We may be able to repair the relationship. We may be able to fix the situation somehow, but we may not. It's not in our control. What is in our control is to give an appropriate, authentic apology, and then we just have to wait and see. But that's not the end, because it's not just the external. Does the community see me as okay now? Maybe not. We hope so. But it doesn't always happen that way. So there's an internal part of redemption. Can I be okay with myself, even if they won't or don't, or people see me a certain way? And we have to separate the two, because a lot of times we get them mixed up, and we're always feeling terrible about ourselves because someone else feels terrible about us. But it's about getting in touch with that purity of spirit of who we are from the time we were born, that is lovable, that is okay, that makes mistakes. We're human beings. And so that internal piece is about the fact that we are imperfect. Nobody gets it right all the time. Our job is to try to fix what we can when we make the mistake. So what's the special sauce that I promised? The special sauce. So for that, I have to turn to the actions of the rock star, Jesus, who comes in and he loves and accepts Zacchaeus. And that's what transforms him. It's the love. And the crazy thing is that when we are in relationship with somebody and they do something that we don't like or that hurts us, what we tend to do is withhold our love. That's a natural thing to do for our children, especially when they're teenagers. They do something and they're being annoying, and we can, get mad at them and withhold our love and try to give them the cold shoulder or whatever. I mean, I'm speaking as a parent of a teenager right now. But also our spouses and our partners, when their actions start grating on us, or they've done something that hurts us, we withhold our love. We pull away from the people at work who are annoying or unethical or inept, from our adult children who sometimes do things that break our hearts. or that scare the heck out of us. And sometimes we even withhold love from ourselves. Sometimes we're the hardest person to love and to give love to. But when we can't forgive ourselves for doing something that we feel is inept or not up to our own expectations of ourselves, even then, think about it. Even Zacchaeus, who was at the height of his most corrupt, selfish, sinful worst, Jesus arrives and shows him love, that he's lovable. And that feeling of experiencing that will transform us. That's the special sauce, love. No matter what somebody has done. Now, it doesn't mean that we can all do that for others, but look for that for ourselves and find a way to love ourselves despite it all, to get in touch with that core part, that pure heart that's been with you from the beginning. Those pure intentions that really come from a good place, that you are a good person, that you do mean well, and that you've made a mistake like we all do sometimes. No matter what you've done in the past, as long as you have breath, you have the opportunity to move towards redemption, to turn things around. If not externally, internally. And you can even be the source of another person's redemption. And by not withholding your love from someone else, but using it to heal and inspire. And I know that like with a teenager, when it's like they're being the biggest brat, and it's like, but I'm going to lean in to tell them I love them and how much I love them despite what they're doing. It's powerful. When you feel at your lowest, when you feel like you are a real jerk, and somebody reminds you that you actually are lovable, and they know it, despite what you've done, it transforms you like nothing else. So let's practice saying some of the most powerful words anyone can say. Repeat after me, if you will. I'm sorry. It's good to practice that, because it's hard to get out when you really have to. It's easy in here. Let's try that one more time. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
I love you.
I love you.
Thank you.
Come from the fire, living in the fire. Go back to the fire, turn the world around. We come from the fire, living in the fire. Go back to the fire, turn the world around. We come from the water, living in the water. Go back to the water.